Another week closer to the 2025 NFL Draft is in the books, and there's no shortage of mock drafts across the internet. Who do they have the Dolphins taking? We're looking at that here today on this episode of Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami, and the NFL Draft lead for the 33rd team. I want to give a special shout out and welcome to our everydayers, because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins over at FanDuel, America's number one sports book. Today on the show, Mock Draft Roundup 2.0 for 2025. No shortage of mock drafts across the internet. Anybody and everybody can write them. It's one of the most inclusive subsections of football media. Right? You look at a team needs list and you see who the players are that are available and who plays what position, and you put them together, and there you go. You got yourself a mock draft. For the work that I've done this year for the 33rd team, I have written as many mock drafts as I have ever written in a draft cycle, and I have been working in the draft space since 2014. So 11. This is draft class number 11 for me. Yikes. Okay. Anyway, time flies when you're having fun, I guess. This next Monday will be the most mock drafts I will have written in a cycle, and it's the pre-combine mock. So we've been very hands-on with the mock drafts this year, and what that has allowed me to do is when I finish, I always like to kind of cross-reference and see where are my projections stacking and ranking and versus the rest of the industry, and like to every once in a while stop here on Locked On Dolphins and take a look around the space, which is what we're doing today. Fox Sports, CBS Sports, The Athletic, the Palm Beach Post with Dolphins' own Joe Shad, and then the latest from the 33rd team from this past Monday, which was a 2-round mock, is what we will be diving into here today on the show. So without further ado, let's start with the Fox Sports mock draft, which released yesterday on Thursday by staff, whoever staff is, but it's on the Fox Sports website. And Fox Sports has the Dolphins at number 13 overall, drafting defensive tackle Walter Nolen from Ole Miss. Names of interest that were off the board by the time the Dolphins came on the clock. You had Josh Simmons at an offensive tackle, Mason Graham, defensive tackle from Michigan, Will Johnson, the corner from Michigan, Shamar Stewart, defensive lineman, Texas A&M. Walter Nolen, there's no doubt from a athleticism and a disruption standpoint, Walter Nolen has the goods. Now, I think whether or not he's a complete player is a little bit of a different conversation. He is stylistically, he is not a guy who consistently works the point of attack. He is a penetration player. And I think as long as you enter your film study with a Walter Nolen with the understanding that this is a player who attacks the backfield, he gets into hip-to-hip relationships with offensive linemen, uncovers with acceleration and contact balance, and hunts the ball coming out of the mesh point in the run game and rushing the passer. That's his game. And man, he's really good at it. Whether or not that is the kind of role that the Dolphins want to embrace within their defensive line rotation, because they really didn't have this player. Like Zach Sealer is a jack of all trades, and I would argue at this stage of his career, a master of all trades. He's one of the most underrated defensive linemen in football. He did it with Christian Wilkins next to him. He did it without Christian Wilkins next to him. He did it with Calais Campbell next to him. And he did it for a good portion of time because of Calais Campbell and his rep counts without Calais Campbell next to him. Sealer's a cornerstone player for you at defensive tackle. But stylistically, he's very different. And guys like Deshaun Hand and Benito Jones and Calais was a little bit more of an end tackle diverse player. But first step quickness at this stage of his career is not really where he wins either, right? He's very savvy of deconstructing blocks and getting hands off his frame and uncovering at first contact and instincts and feeling blocks develop and recognizing plays based off formations and down and distance situation. That is Calais Campbell. Walter Nolen's a dude that this cat's just going to get out there in the B gap and he's going to blow your doors off. Now, that's for better or for worse. Sometimes that upfield penetration can create two wash and a guy that can get attached to you and ride you out. And then you really don't have the other clubs in your bag when you first come into the league to be able to get off those blocks. So there's risk and reward, and there's pros and the cons with the skill set of a Walter Nolen, projecting that into a Dolphins defense that really didn't have that player. Is that by design? Would they be willing? How much are you willing to change your ideology and how you complement players up front? I obviously don't have that answer. This is a player you can win with, and if you drafted him at 13, I would get it. I would get it. I look at some of the other names that were available. Here's the names that go after 13 that I would just put an earmark next to and say, I would be interested in this player for the Dolphins in the right situation, depending on what happens in free agency. Michael Williams at edge goes at 15 from the Georgia Bulldogs. Tyler Warren at tight end goes at 14 to the Colts. Tyler Booker, we're going to talk about a little bit later on the show. From Alabama, Jahdae Barron, the corner nickel hybrid defensive back, big time dude, I think is the first thing you could use to describe him. Goes at 19 to Tampa Bay. Kenneth Grant, 24 to the Minnesota Vikings. Jalon Walker, 26. We'll talk about him a little bit later. Dolphins had a lot of options, really attractive options on the board in this mock at 13. You go to the CBS Sports mock, which was done by Josh Edwards. What's fun for me with some of these is I'm blind reacting. I don't know who they gave the Dolphins. Malaki Starks, the pick here, this one for Josh Edwards from CBS Sports. This is a very popular pairing. It's been low-hanging fruit because of the Dolphins situation at safety and free agency, where Elijah Campbell's a free agent, and Jordan Poyer's a free agent, and Javon Holland's a free agent. And Javon Holland's apparently in his feelings that he's not getting posted on the Dolphins Instagram account anymore and thought about unfollowing the team account. Starks is a player, however, that I would end up being surprised based off of the momentum of the last month about the buzz around the inside of the league. If he ends up going in the top half of the first round. He did not play his best football in 2024. The football IQ and the coverage versatility and the physicality that he brings is all really, really good. But he did not play his best football this past year. There were more missed tackles this season than there have been in previous years. And you have to battle the stereotype of the positional value that if you'd have told me at the beginning of the season, I thought he would have been well positioned to transcend some of that positional value stereotype that exists with the safety. I mean, your big media insiders, the Daniel Jeremiahs of the world that are well connected, like he's lucky to sneak into the first round at all right now. So for me, Malaki Starks is still a player that I have ranked as a top 15 player. I would not be mad at all if the Dolphins made that their selection. But predictively speaking, this feels like a player that the league is lower on than what the pre-college football season buzz had on Malaki Starks, that everybody just kind of has as their preconceived established notion of who this player is from a value perspective. Interesting to watch. Now, we have The Athletic from their beat writers, and we have the Palm Beach Post, Joe Shad. I'm going to dig into those mock drafts next here on Locked On Dolphins, so stick with us. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip, or if you want to bet on a big fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting, regardless of the score. Whether you're backing your favorite team for a late game rally or betting on a player to hit a clutch three, you never miss your chance. Plus, the app is easy to use And when you win, you can get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, let's take a look at our next mock, which comes from the Athletic beat writer staff. So this is a collaborative effort on this mock. And the Dolphins here drafting Will Johnson. I need talking my language here with a pick like this, I'll tell you what. Cornerback from Michigan, very highly regarded throughout the course of the summertime. And Will Johnson missed some time this season with a foot injury. He had missed at least a month's worth of action. Sounds like it was a turf toe was what it was formally diagnosed as. But his play, you go back to his freshman season, this is a big corner. This is an instinctive corner. This is a corner that has ball production. With some of these players you're looking at that have this length and explosiveness and change of direction ability and the blend of all of it, and it's all potential, and they don't have the resume of getting their hat on the football and getting their hands on the football and making impact plays on the perimeter. Will Johnson doesn't have that problem. You go back to his freshman season, the impact that he was able to make, and he was a key piece of that team that won the national championship. Very instinctive player. Much better transitions in space when playing in off than what you would expect for a player that is built and framed like Will Johnson. There is some Derek Stingley vibes to his pre-draft process. I'm not saying that he profiles as a player as Derek Stingley, but Derek Stingley was a freshman phenom who dealt with some injuries in the later portions of his college career, and then it kind of became this whole debate with him and Sauce Gardner, and this was a player that was generally perceived to be a top player in the class, and then it kind of cooled off, and then it got hot again late, and he gets drafted early. And Dolphins experienced firsthand what happens when you test Derek Stingley. It was a big reason why they lost that football game to the Houston Texans. Will Johnson was a freshman phenom who didn't play his best football before he entered into the draft and dealt with some injuries, and his name is cooled down a little bit. The question is whether he's going to spike back up or not. And if he spikes back up, he's probably not going to be a player that's available for you at 13. But if he doesn't spike back up, and he's available, I think this is the defensive back, didn't play his best ball in 2024 pick to make. I think him and Jalen Ramsey would be an outstanding cornerback duo. Presuming you bring back Kader Kohu, that puts you in a position where you really have, I think, a strong 1 through 3. Will Johnson potentially has the opportunity to be the best cornerback not named Jalen Ramsey the Dolphins have seen since 2021 Xavier Howard, 2022 Xavier Howard. And it's been a while. And Howard, like late stage Howard here in Miami, wasn't the player that he was at his best either. Names that Miami passed on in this mock draft from the Athletic beat, or at least I should say names that are off the board that are of interest. Jalon Walker is off the board, the pass rusher from Georgia. Armand Mimbu is off the board, the offensive lineman from Missouri. Tyler Warren is off the board. He went to San Francisco in this mock. But names that are available, it's Kenneth Grant and Shamar Stewart and Josh Connerly and Kelvin Banks, who gets some gas for this team. Jahdae Barron did not go in the first round of this mock. So pretty decent blend of names that were in consideration but off the board in previous mocks and names that were available. And you've had some flip-flop on what end of 13, above or below, they end up going. Joe Shad wanted to give a little love to one of our guys here on the Dolphins beat. Joe Shad making picks for all 32 teams with this mock draft, and sure enough, it's Tyler Booker, who I promised we were going to talk about a little later in the show. I did peek on Joe's. And Tyler Booker being the pick for Miami here at number 13. I know Mina Kimes just pleaded with Chris Greer to draft guards and draft interior offensive linemen on social media. Obviously, this is the big focus point for a lot of the fans that are tired of an offensive line that is either good but then gets banged up, or it's not good and you go cheap in certain spots, and you lost Rob Hunt and your answer was to hold serve with an underachieving Liam Eichenberg and an undrafted free agent who'd played for you for a few years as a depth player in Rob Jones. And then Isaiah Wynn. And those were the bets you placed, and all three of them pretty much went nuclear for you this year. We're not going to do that again. I can tell you that much. Tyler Booker stylistically is not necessarily a marquee outside zone pick. So a pick like a Tyler Booker, I would assume, would indicate some level of evolution in how the Dolphins offense operationally works. He's much more of a phone booth type of player. Now, he can get up onto the second level with linear and vertical releases, but when you string out the point of attack and you got to, scrape and get over top of, if you're in a deficit to a linebacker on the play side and you got to get up over top of the tackle and get up and get on that, ideally his inside shoulder, and try to wash him out to create a cutback lane for the back, Booker's going to get challenged in some of those spots. Now, he has a super heavy anchor. He's built with a super low center of gravity. He's very difficult to play through, and he has firm edges in pass protection. So I think these are the appeals, that there's some give and some take, and it would be an indication of some scheme evolution. And I'm not opposed to that at all. And if you told me they drafted Tyler Booker, I would not be. Depends on how they spend their money in free agency, and it depends on who's on the board. I wouldn't be mad at Tyler Booker. Do I expect the Dolphins to be in a position where they need a starter at offensive guard? No. There's been a number of studies that have been done in different places, and I've alluded to some of them, but Brian Burke from ESPN just put out a number of them, or the latest version of it, really. And it looks at offensive line, and it's just looking at pass protection win rates. And what's interesting is the offensive guard spot, your first 2 years in the league, approximately, you don't really get better. It's just not a great data trend. But there's a dip before the climb for players at this position. And many of these arbitrary and hard to quantify and hard to buy completely in on measures of offensive line success, the commonality between all of the different measures of success analytically that you try to put some stock into, but you really take with a grain of salt because it's very complicated and there's a lot of layers to offensive line play, is that it is one of the slower developing positions in the NFL. Now, if you're drafting a player at 13 at offensive guard, you better be darn sure this is a player that's ready to play in the NFL and lie on the upper bands of that data set that exists. But the overwhelming research suggests that guys that have been in the league 3 or 4 or 5 years, that's when they start to see their greatest leaps in growth. And I'm not going to sit here and justify bring back Rob Jones and bring back Liam. Like, that ship sailed on those guys as far as I'm concerned. Like, I'm not really interested in bringing any of them back. I think it's a room that needs a whole bunch of fresh blood. But regardless, your likelihood of getting a strong hit at the position at 13, where you're outside the upper band of like draft capital, where seemingly like the Joe Alts and the Penei Sewells get drafted, you're a little bit more into the uncharted waters of middle of first round territory. Then you're talking about a guard, so that complicates things further. It's just not open and shut like, yeah, draft a guard for me. I would rather you spend the money, ideally on at least one, if not two guys that are coming off of rookie contracts where they're into that ripe age window to start to see significant growth. So what happened with Aaron Brewer? It's exactly what happened with Aaron Brewer. It's exactly what happened with Austin Jackson. It took him till year 4. So who are the players that are on the market that are coming off of rookie contracts that have shown signs of life that you think can be good fits for your scheme? I'd rather do that than draft just a guard at 13 to check the box and say, oh, well, we drafted a guard at 13. We're good. Because that's not going to guarantee anything. Now, I think you do need draft capital investment in your offensive line, which is exactly why we're saving my mock draft from the 33rd team for last here on Locked On Dolphins. Make sure you guys stick with us. Let's start with the first round pick. This was the one I did last Monday. And I'll read you this synopsis for my block here. Jalon Walker is the pick from University of Georgia. Pass rush linebacker. Heard from some Dolphins fans that didn't like the pick. It's the not an immediate impact. I wrote a story last Friday about Jalon Walker, 4/30/13. I explored why I think this is a tailor-made player for the simulated pressure styles of defense, because he's capable of playing off ball, but I don't think playing him off ball full-time is going to put him in position to be successful. And he rushes off the edge, and man, he's built low to the ground. He's like 250 pounds. He's got good length. He's dense. He's powerful. He showcases hand versatility with how he gets off of pass blocks. Does he have the deepest pass rush counter bag? No. But when you're 6'2", 250 like this, it really creates challenges because a lot of tackles got to punch down on you. And if you can reduce your surface area and you could force some missed hands, you could really play with power and come up through guys and play through the ground and create a lot of power and collapse angles, which is what Jalon Walker does. But then his off-ball linebacker stuff gives him experience dropping into zones in pass coverage. And the whole theory with the Dolphins and Anthony Weaver and the simulated pressure defense that's so hot across the league right now is we're going to put our four guys up on the offensive line, and then we're going to show pressure. So we're going to walk linebackers up. We're going to show the nickel off the edge, and we're going to show you pressure and force you and dictate you to set your protection based off of our pre-snap presentation and who you have to honor. And then at the snap of the ball, we're only going to bring four guys, but it's not the four guys with their hand in the dirt. It's maybe the nickel comes off the edge. And if the nickel comes off the edge from the left, that means the rush linebacker on the right oftentimes is going to drop out and play a hook zone coverage and try to take that window away as they rotate the rest of the defensive shell behind it to evenly distribute the field. If your edge rushers aren't comfortable with playing in zone coverage, they're sitting ducks. Now, dude, Emmanuel Ogbah got a pick versus the Titans. Like, and he's not a guy that was particularly interested in playing in space. But if you got guys that are good at it and guys that are experienced in zone drops, that's where it gets really exotic in the things that you can do. And that's why I think Jalon Walker's a fit. So the synopsis I had was Dolphins are facing several big money decisions this offseason, including on the edge with veteran pass rusher Bradley Chubb. If Chubb, who's owed $19.45 million in cash and is on the books for approximately $29 million in cap space in each of the next two seasons, is cut loose after missing all of 2024, the Dolphins would be wise to draft Jalon Walker. Yes, this is a team that has 2024 first-round pick Chop Robinson and 2021 first-round pick Jalen Phillips on the depth chart too, but Phillips has had each of his last two seasons cut short with an Achilles and an ACL, and the Eagles just reminded everyone that there's no such thing as too many good pass rushers. Walker's a talent that is perfectly tailored to play rush linebacker and Anthony Weaver simulated pressure and blitz-rooted defense. That's the pick at 13. Names I thought about at 13 included Tyler Warren, Kenneth Grant, who went in each of the next two picks. Then you got to get down to Michael Williams and Jahdae Barron, which went at 23 and 24. Tyler Booker in this draft went at 28 to the Lions. Malaki Starks went at 31, and Walter Nolen went at 32. So that's a bunch of the names that we just talked about. They all end up going in the first round. But then the pick at 48 came. And the pick I made for the Dolphins that with this pick was Jonas Avenia, from Arizona, who has played right tackle, I think projects inside at guard, and is kind of cut from the same cloth as Tyler Booker, although he played tackle where Booker was a guard. And in an emergency, Booker kicked out and played tackle. Plays on the right side. He'd probably be your right guard. Mauler, mean guy, plays with that edge that you're looking for. So I know one of the names that's kind of been rumored and whispered of being a potential Dolphins target from a number of different outlets that are out there You look at the free agency class, and I know a stylistically changed player that's been invoked when looking at the Dolphins and options is like a Will Hernandez from Arizona. This is a guy that plays the game in a similar way to a Will Hernandez. So if you are going to lean into that schematic shift or willingness to have a schematic shift and have some guys that have that edge that you're playing with, Savanea feels like a really good option. The hard thing for me was the names that went off the board after this pick, because I did want to make sure that this was like a meat and potatoes draft class with a lot of guys in the trenches. But there are two names that went immediately after this pick at 48 that I had a really hard time not picking. One of them is Elik Ayumanor from Stanford. He's a wide receiver. 6'2", 210, killer in the run game, blocks like crazy, good contested catch guy, fluid after the catch for a bigger bodied receiver. I think he's got a lot of room for growth as a route runner. But he's a smart player. Dude went to Stanford, right? Like, the Stanford's not just that place that just lets anybody in that's got 4 stars or more. He's a great fit and target for what the Dolphins want to be. And then that could open the door for, do you potentially move on from 10? Do you feel better about your wide receiver situation if you have a bird in the hand as compared to one in the bush to make a move like that? And the other one is Carson Swessinger, the linebacker from UCLA, where if you told me that the Dolphins could pair Swessinger next to Jordan Brooks, that would have the potential to me to be one of the better linebacker pairings in all of football. And that is a commonality that exists between many of the great defenses that have played in the league over the last couple of years. What do you do in free agency on the offensive line? Does it preempt you from using a top 50 pick on a guard? If it does, then names like Ayumanor and Swessinger are names that are going to be very, very high up on my list that I would arguably be more excited about adding than some of these names we're talking about in the first round, based off the fit and not collecting talent, but building a team, which is a distinction that I think Miami needs to be a little bit more firm in making. That's going to do it for us here today on the show. Hope you guys enjoyed Mock Draft Roundup 2.0 for the 2025 draft cycle. I'm Kyle Krabs. You can keep it locked in right here on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. Make it a great rest of your day. Make it a great weekend. I'll be back to talk to you all again on Monday, and then I am off to Indianapolis for the NFL Combine.